Happy April, Husker fans. Pick Six Podcast, Sam McKewon along with Evan Bland here on a Wednesday in April. Spring football about halfway point at this point, and we're kind of in the middle of week 2, week 3 at this point. They'll have a scrimmage. Evan, we've watched a couple of practices. We'll get to that in a minute. We're going to talk about Nebraska basketball just a little bit, where the Huskers are with the transfer portal. Lots of busyness there. We'll talk a little bit of Husker baseball. They've had a couple of a horrible midweek last week, good midweek this week. They won at Kansas. Talk a little bit about a big weekend series coming up against the Hawkeyes, and maybe there'll be some extra stuff after that. The House versus NCAA settlement has not been approved yet. May not be approved this week, may be approved next week, so there's not necessarily a lot of finality there. So far, pretty clean injury report out of spring camp. Not too many guys getting banged up, so we don't have a lot to talk about there. We will get to the practice stuff here in a second. Evan, here we are, mid-April.
Here we are, Sam. Here we are. It's good. We've had a couple open practices, and we're cycling through coaches and players at this point. And I don't know. I actually feel like it's been a fairly interesting spring football, and I don't know that I would say that every single year. But I've been fascinated to get to know some of the coaches, some of the transfers that have come in. I just think there are a lot of interesting storylines that have going on in this camp. Do you feel that way?
A few. I think I'm most interested in things that I don't know can have fruition until much later. And so I'm excited for the season. Again, as I'm going through the Big Ten teams and I'm kind of doing these look-ins, I kind of listen to what everybody else is saying, and I think it's going to be a good league this year. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think Nebraska's going to have a go, and they're going to have a rigorous schedule in the Big Ten. And I don't say that again. I don't say that lightly. I thought last year it was going to be manageable, and then Indiana cropped up and kicked Nebraska's butt, and then UCLA came in here and won a game that I didn't think UCLA was going to win. And so I thought last year was a little bit of a rude awakening, and I think this year you're going to see a number of teams just get better. Maybe Minnesota will take a step back, but USC's going to get better. UCLA's getting better. Michigan State's going to be better than they were last year. And so I think it's going to be interesting. And the things that I've heard about Nebraska in this camp have been relatively positive. Obviously had the one departure in Hardley Gilmore, and I'm not sure that that's much news because he never played for Nebraska and he barely had any snaps.
Right.
Even in spring camp. So he took up 2 weeks of snaps. He took up a little bit of winter conditioning time, but ultimately he's not here. Sounds like they're starting to kind of dial in on who maybe their top receivers are. No surprises in what that group would be.
No.
I've been intrigued by the defensive conversation and how that's going to look. I heard a phrase from Rob Dvorak yesterday. I asked him about the pass defense, and he said, they've been working on their man and their zone and their match coverage. And that was intriguing to hear. Not that they don't normally do that, but that was an intriguing comment to hear. And so, I think we've heard, there's a couple of position switches, but we have a pretty good sense of this team, and I think we have a pretty good sense of where they want to go.
Yeah, I think so. And, the open sessions that we've had, I don't know that there were any grand takeaways. I just thought it's good to lay eyes on some of these guys and see how they look. We were able to split up earlier this week, and I was with the offense, and I was just struck by the receivers and how fluid those guys looked. You mentioned how that group's kind of set near the top. I mean, just a lot of depth. Dane Key and Ja'Cory Barney, and you kind of go down the list of guys that they've brought in, but it's just there's a fluidity there, and it feels like it feels more like a pro camp in some ways, where you don't have a lot of like walk-ons who are sort of jumping in. Like, a lot of these guys are established names. A lot of these guys are older, more physically defined, proven guys. And so it does kind of feel like spring. While there's still some experimenting and they're tinkering with schemes and things like that, it does feel like it's a little more streamlined, maybe a little bit more professional than it's been in the past. What do you think, Sam, is the strength of this team at this point? We're talking about a lot of areas where they're improving or maybe trending upward, but like, if they had a game today, what's that area that they're able to hang their hat on to try to get a win?
I think coordinator to quarterback operation is a strength, so I think Holgorsen's ability to communicate to Raiola what needs to be done and Raiola's ability to be able to operate the offense. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to execute it, but the operation of the offense, I think, is going to be very smooth and very seamless. I think they'll be able to move at as fast of a tempo as they want to because Raiola is ahead of the game mentally, and Holgorsen's going to call the game in a way that gets them in and out. And so, like, it's almost like you're taking the way I would describe it is you're reducing the inflammation. You know, if you think of like, you know, a spine, an inflamed spine, you're reducing a person's movement, right? If you can reduce the inflammation, in other words, the time between the play calls, the complexity of the calls, the shuttling in and out of players, the shifts and the trades and the motions, all the little things that you're trying to get done in order to run a play because you don't really feel like you can do it without running a very detailed play. When you reduce a number of those things, the operation of the offense can be a lot smoother. The quarterbacks and receivers can get on the same page. You know, the offensive line can get in a rhythm. Now, there are games in which that's going to be more challenging. You're going to go to Penn State and you think you're going to do the, you know, that kind of thing. It's harder to do against really good defenses. It's going to be hard to do against Michigan. But you do want games in which you're able to go out against Cincinnati, very first game of the year, and just play football. Just play football and not get bogged down in the play calls and all the little things that have to happen. I feel like under Marcus Satterfield, who had a nice interview yesterday, there were a lot of moving parts. And anytime you have a bunch of different moving parts, you're either trying to go against a defense that's really, really good and you have to do a bunch of things, or you just don't feel confident in your execution, so you're having to rely on, you know, motions and trades and shifts and personnel formations and all those things. And when Matt Rule said, hey, we're trying to serve too many masters, that's what he's talking about, I think. So the operation of the offense, I think, is going to be very, very smooth, and that'd be the thing that I'm the most confident in at this point.
I was thinking about that, too. I think it might be the offensive line, and maybe that sounds strange when you lose a 2-year starting center and your forever starting right tackle. But, like, watching that group out there, I mean, those guys, they looked like dudes. And some of the guys that were hurt, you talk about Henry Letufsky and Teddy Prohaska and Turner Corcoran, like, these are guys that Nebraska's would like to have involved but doesn't necessarily have to have involved next year. I mean,
right.
what a luxury that is. And so you look and you see – whether it's Justin Evans or Sam Sledge at center, and you see Elijah Pritchett there, and Rocco Spindler is going to be an interior guy. Gunnar Gatula, I thought, played really well when he was pressed into duty last year. Like, there's a depth there. And when you watch, I was just kind of struck watching their workout yesterday, kind of off to the side in North Stadium there. Like, this is Donovan Raiola's group. Like, this is his room. He's been there longer than any other coach. There's a culture that's set. His line of water the bamboo, right? Like, bamboo, if you water it, it grows big and tall and strong. Like, you can kind of see it in progress out there as those guys are going through there. And so, I mean, I don't know. This is maybe it has the potential to be Nebraska's best O-line since early Frost era, late Riley era, 2016, 2017.
15.
Like, I think that
was a good line.
That's the kind of level of potential that you're talking about with what this group can be.
I think you're right. I think they've kind of, they trust Raiola to handle that side of that part of it, and they kind of stay away from it. You can tell.
They do.
He's got a good helper there in Aaron Coling, who I think is still in the program.
Yep.
So he has a good guy that's helping them with that operation, but they do a nice job of developing the players. Again, when Holgorsen came in, and one of the first things he did is he said, the offensive line's played pretty good. So what he's saying in that moment is he's like, listen, they're doing what they're supposed to do in order to create the opportunities for the playmakers. His critique that day was related to the running backs, and he was not wrong about that critique. He was right. Where I think what was unspoken is, and now if Dylan Raiola is getting 3.5 seconds or whatever, he needs to get the ball out of his dang hands. And we need to create an offense that allows Dylan to do that. He has a good arm, so he's not like, well, I don't know if I can throw it there. Like, you got to create an offense that gets the ball out of his hands and gives Dylan an opportunity to get in a rhythm. And one of the things that I thought Nebraska didn't do very well in the first 2 years of the Satterfield play calling is it didn't give Raiola, or for that matter, Harburg and Sims, an opportunity to 3-yard throw, 3-yard throw, 5-yard throw, 28-yard throw. Sometimes you have to get defensive backs in the habit of coming up to make a tackle. Sometimes they miss a tackle, and a 4-yard hitch or a little crosser turns into a 17-yard play because you have to ask defensive players to execute over and over again. And I didn't think too often, I guess the equivalent is putting the ball in play in baseball. Now in the major leagues, you put the ball in play all the time, you're going to get out. You have to pick and choose your spots. You have to hit for power. But in college baseball, and I think you would attest to this, if you got 5 guys in a row that put the ball in play, there's probably going to be an error. There's probably going to be something that's not called an error, but would have been an out in the major leagues, a single or something like that. You might get a hit by pitch.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
In college baseball, you want to put the ball in play. Same way in college football. Get the ball in the hands of guys. And too often, I thought last year, the ball just sitting in Raiola's hand, and he gets sacked, or the play would kind of go awry and he'd throw it away, and there were too many circumstances like that. And so I think Holgorsen is probably going to do a really good job of getting the ball in the playmaker's hands, and the offensive line has provided enough opportunities to do that they're playing at that baseline, and they're often playing above that baseline. You would love for them to be as good as Notre Dame. That'd be great. Or Ohio State's offensive line, and Ohio State's line was a mess for much of last year. Maybe they can get there. Maybe this is the year that they get there.
So
I would love to see it.
So we're both saying that we feel like different strengths of the team are on the offensive side. This has been the side that's held Nebraska back in recent years. It's the same offense, at least in principle, that Nebraska's had under Rule in terms of Holgorsen sort of paring down what's being executed. So, how would you describe, how different this offense will be? Because, again, same terminology. Is it just a matter of, hey, they have better players and the potential for explosive plays? Or philosophically, how different will this attack be from what we've seen in the Rule era so far?
Like I said, I think the operation of it is going to be just less inflamed, just smoother. So the ability to be adaptable and to be creative in play is going to be higher. So I think part of what they want to be able to do is, get the ball to Ja'Cory Barney, get it to him 3 yards from the line of scrimmage, and let Ja'Cory Barney do something with that. Or on this play, if we've got man-to-man coverage and Dane Key is taking an outside release between the numbers and the sidelines, throw the damn ball to him and let him go make a play. And they did that against Boston College. They come right out. We're freezing in Yankee Stadium in the open-air press box.
Yeah.
And they come right out and they're like, screw it, we're going deep. They're just willing to be aggressive. And they were aggressive with receivers that weren't necessarily getting open. And so I think they want to do that. The air raid is the thing the air raid does really well, Evan. And obviously they're not air raid, but the thing that it used to do really well with Mike Leach is, your corners are going to come up, we're going to go over the top. Your corners are going to be back, we're going to throw in front of them. Mm-hmm. If your corners are doing a nice job of covering people, we're going to start throwing these shoot routes to backs. And we're going to isolate backs on middle backers. I'll never forget in 2009, Nebraska's defense, maybe the best in the country. The one guy that got him was Leach. And the way he got him was he kept throwing those little shoot routes out to running backs, and they were isolated on, Dillard or Compton. And Dillard and Compton were NFL players, but it is very hard for a linebacker to run 22 yards to his right or his left and then make a tackle. Mm-hmm. And so Leach had the ability to dissect really, really good defenses by getting the ball out of the dang guy's hands and making guys make tackles. And that's the thing that I think will be different and better. You can do that within the structure of a pro-style offense. To be clear, they still have to go out and execute it. So Raiola needs to get better. I think he will. Emmett Johnson needs to continue on the track that he's on. And then I'll be honest with you, you got to have tight ends that can get open. And right now I feel comfortable that Luke Lindenmeyer can do that. Harburg's got to keep coming. Their two most talented tight ends are hurt. There wasn't much glimmer given. Glimmer's the wrong word. Marcus Satterfield doesn't know when Carter Nelson will be back. Neither do we. Mac Markway will be back, but will he be 100%? He tore up his knee.
Right.
So probably the two most talented guys are banged up. Are the receivers going to get open? I think so. So there's a whole bunch of things on the offensive side where it's like if your clients were the inventors of Facebook, they would have invented Facebook, the line from the social network.
Right.
If Nebraska's good at it, then they will have been good at it. On the defensive side of the ball, I think the intention to get better, to be really, really good, is there. It's going to be a question of putting all the pieces together, getting the right guys on the field. And as Rob Dvorak said, and I don't think he said it just randomly. I mean, he kind of said it because it's a truism, but I think he was really trying to make the point of whatever we think we got done last year is gone. This is a whole new team. This is a whole new defense. Vincent Shavers was very good as a true freshman at times, but he can't be a good true freshman next year. He has to be an elite sophomore. And so often freshmen will have that burst, and then when they become sophomores, they're just about as good as they were as freshmen, which means that they didn't get better. And so I think there's an intentionality on that side of the ball, and I think you'll see it come through. We'll see.
Isn't that especially true at Nebraska, where for years it felt like, especially in the old recruiting system before the portal, when freshmen would come in and somebody would do something, and you'd be like, "Whoa, this is the guy," and then they just kind of stayed at that level for the next 3 years or the next 4 years or whatever it might be. Like, I mean, we've talked about that on this podcast too, about like the elite clay, like the talented guys need to get better. I mean, Shavers is a great example of that.
Yes.
A lot of guys who are really good examples of that. The other thing I took away from the open practice, Sam, was like it was a reminder to me of how Nebraska's reconstructed its staff. And if you were in the Hawks Center, you heard Phil Snow as the loudest voice, 69, 70 years old, whatever he is. Like, he was the guy that you heard outdoors. It was Dana Holgorsen literally on an island in the middle of the field as routes went by him and in front of him, and he was the guy in charge. So I'm curious, like, you're a big system guy. You say that all the time. Is Nebraska's restructured coaching staff more in response to what Nebraska needs now, or is it just because of the NCAA rules change and this is the way things are naturally going?
I think it's a combination of both. So they've had an opportunity to add some pieces that I think make Matt Rule's life a little easier. You know, he has an extension of himself in Phil Snow, and so Phil's going to go coach the positions that he feels like needs help at that moment, and he may coach 2 or 3 different positions in a given week because Snow can coach all of those things. And then I think with John Butler, I think in some ways is very much an extension of Matt Rule in his personality, his intensity, and I don't want to use the word impatience, but like his willingness to be on the edge and to almost be like, okay, we're gonna go ahead and roll the dice here. We're gonna roll it. We're gonna roll the dice. And in that way, he's a little bit like Bo. Like, Bo had an instinct, and he wasn't always right, but Bo had an instinct to know when to do the casino blitz, or to know when to have one guy drop and another guy come. It's a feel thing. And Bo had that instinct pretty much all the time that he was there. And I almost felt like he got so systemic toward the end of his tenure that he wasn't aggressive enough. But I think Butler has that. And I think Tony White was a very good system coordinator, but you kind of heard them say, well, we want to do a little bit different things on third down. They want to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more exotic there. I think White was a little bit more, let's do what we do. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's a lot of great defenses. That's exactly who they are. That's Iowa in a lot of ways. But I think Rule wants a coordinator who's going to push the button and be able to say, all right, this play, we're going to do stuff. We're going to do something that we think's going to work, but it may not work, but we're going to do it, and the quarterback's not going to expect it. So I think he's an extension that way. I think Snow's an extension of Matt Rule as a drill maker. You know, not drill maker, but like a guy that believes in technique and drill work. I think Addison Williams is an addition there. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's pretty streamlined because I don't know that Dana Holgorsen needs 1 million people. Again, what they want to do is get their players to react and make plays and play fast and play football. And I don't know that you need 1 million guys to do that. And then you need some physicality, and I think your physicality coaches are Raiola and Satterfield. I do. I think that's what they're. I think Satterfield is probably an excellent position coach. Very, very detailed, very tough. You know, you can tell Marcus Satterfield's a tough guy. Don't mess around with him, all that. And I'm sure he's done a nice job of instilling that energy into that room.
And it's freed up Matt Rule, too. Like, you can tell, even when the offense was working this week, like, Rule's talking on the sideline to some other staffers, and he's observing and watching Holgorsen and the position coaches go through their thing. And, like, Rule's biggest strength has always been his big picture thinking, strategic approach to things. And, like, you can just tell this is going to free him up to do it. And he kind of jokes that, yeah, maybe he's a little bored in practice, but I think you're positioning the head coach to be in an area where his biggest talents lie. And now you have this very teaching-based staff. I think that's the other thing was, what was it John Butler said a couple weeks ago was Matt Rule's big thing to him was in the NFL you coach, and in college you train. And it really feels like that ethos is starting to spread a lot more. You're seeing Da'Keil Shorts and Terry Braden like get in there on the individual drills, and
Braden's a good coach.
And there's just a lot of
very active.
Even from where we're standing 20 yards away, you can hear a lot of teaching, and it's not all rah stuff. In fact, not a lot of it's rah stuff. It's technical pointers and hey, let's do this again, and it just you can just kind of it feels like a classroom. It feels like a classroom on grass is what they're doing. And the other thing that I think I keep coming back to is like this wouldn't work without the right people. Like not every defensive coordinator would want a Phil Snow maybe overseeing and providing input. Maybe not every position coach would want an offensive coordinator to have total control. Like it feels like the personalities are also in place, and they have to be, or this kind of thing wouldn't work.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Braden's a good coach. He had very aggressive drill work. The first three guys going through the drills each time were Riley Van Poppel, Elijah Judy, and Cam Lenhart. That tells you something. I think that if you were to tell me those would be your three starters to start the season, I wouldn't be surprised. Riley Van Poppel looks really good physically. You know, he's not quite as thick as Ty Robinson, but very close. Judy looks good. Taller than Nash Hutmaker. And then, I think Lenhart looks good. I think he's going to be a very important player on this team this year. He's got to make a big jump as a junior. He was a guy that from freshman to sophomore year kind of stayed the same.
Right.
On the Jacks, Desan McCullough, and they don't have many guys there, which tells you that they feel like Desan McCullough and Willis McGahee, the fourth, are going to play a lot.
Yep.
They are getting a lot of reps. There's only like 6 guys there. Jordan Ochoa is one of them. I think those two are going to play a lot. McGahee and McCullough will play a lot of football. And then in the secondary, you can tell there's just a ton of guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a battle back there. So watched a lot of Williams Nwaneri. Thought he looked all right. He's still learning. Gabe Moore is still learning, but I like Gabe Moore's frame.
Keanu Davis?
He had to do drills a couple times.
Okay.
Not because he was not violent or aggressive. Braden is very specific in what he teaches. So when he's asking a guy to use his right hand to shuck a tapping dummy, he doesn't want him shoving it. He wants him just tapping the slight back of it. So like the difference between shoving you on the arm and getting you right there. He wants that. He wants it on the back. And so if you don't do it, you got to do it again. Davis is a pass rusher. He's got a pass rusher's frame. I don't know if he's going to be the guy that you put in against Iowa on 3rd and 2, but maybe that'll come with time. David Hoofkin, interesting. Dylan Parrott is probably going to play some. He's an older walk-on from Iowa. Thought he looked okay. Yeah, Gabe Moore might play. Now, there's a work in progress there, but his frame is not the frame of a redshirt freshman. He looks good. So that'll be a name to potentially watch. Nwaneri's going to play. He's an incredible size. again, I think it's going to be a work in progress. I don't think he's where Riley Van Poppel is, and I don't think he's where Cam Lenhart is. But he's going to obviously get on the football field. Judy's really important. He's got to have a good season.
He looks good.
He's got to have a good season.
He built up
I think
his
he will
body.
too, but he's got to, because they don't necessarily have a bunch of guys like him. They're a little undersized at what you would call the nose tackle spot, so he'll be interesting. I think the Jacks are the guys I already mentioned. Secondary, we'll see.
Ton of guys.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I think we'll know more about the secondary when the transfer portal opens.
Yep.
And guys leave. And let's be clear about something. There are going to be guys who leave in the secondary irrespective of whether there are roster limits.
Just because
So
they're buried.
if they don't approve the House NCAA settlement and they say, screw it, or they come back and they change the roster limits and they let you grandfather it in and say we're going to be at 125 this year and 120 and then whatever, which they might do because the judge seemed the least interested in those roster limits, and I'll give you why I think it was at 105 here in a second, even though I don't know for sure if I'm right. There's still going to be guys who leave because they want to play, and they can see the depth chart and go, well, I don't want to be fourth string.
Yep.
I'm a redshirt sophomore, and I don't want to be fourth string. I want to go somewhere else and play. So there'll be conversations they have afterwards. Hey, look, man, you can stay. The roster limits have changed, but you just need to know where you are on the depth chart, and there's going to be a few guys that are like, I'm going to go because they want to play. Now, back to the roster limit thing. As everybody knows, the settlement set it at 105. And here's why I think they set it at 105. I could be wrong about this, but this is my opinion. I think they set it at 105 because the presumption is that they would have all 105 guys on scholarship. And so they were trying to do a good job of balancing the number of scholarships on the side of men's sports and the number of scholarships of players on the women's sports. They didn't want to overbear the men's side. Truth is, I don't think a lot of teams will scholarship 105 guys.
No.
I think they might scholarship 95. I think some schools might scholarship 85, but I don't think they're going to scholarship all 105. And what's more, I think you're going to see teams go, if they do a grandfathered roster in, and they say, you can be at 120 this year. 120 to me is the right number. It doesn't need to be 150, irrespective of what Matt Rule was trying to accomplish with his spring league. 120 is a good number, and I think everybody okay, 120. You'd still see about 85 to 90 guys scholarship, and then that last group being walk-ons. And they would be compensated through revenue, but you would see some walk-ons in there. One, you've got some dudes that are 4.9 GPA students who are getting money. Like they're
academics, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so you've got some guys in there that are elite students. The other thing is you've got some people. You've got, I think, some folks, some boosters or whatever. You got people that want to support the walk-ons, not non-scholarship guys. And so, there's a way to do this, and I think maybe the roster number got down lower in part because there was a presumption, a false one, that everybody would go to 105 scholars. They won't do it. Just like Nebraska baseball is probably not going to have 34 scholarships.
No, they won't.
Arizona State apparently is. I find that hard to believe. I find that very hard to believe. Why they would pay all that, I don't really know. But, Nebraska baseball is not going to 34.
No, they
They'll
might go
probably
to 15 to 20, probably, from 11.7.
And now if you want to, hey, there's a guy right there. We want to give him a full scholarship. You can go do it. You can be like, hey, you know what? This year, AD, Troy Dannon, we got a guy. We're confident he's going to come to Nebraska. We believe in this guy. Full scholarship on him. And you're not worried about the 11.7. You're just going from 15 to 16 or 17 to 18,
Well, and the other complicating factor is it's not just scholarship. It's also, it's going to be revenue sharing. So, okay, you have 85 scholarships, but you could share revenue with everybody. And what's really the difference between a scholarship and making 6 figures in rev share or high 5 figures in rev share?
Where the money goes, how the money is allocated. So the scholarship money is part of revenue sharing. So if you offer a scholarship, that comes off the top of it, but the scholarship just pays for your books. It just pays for your tuition. It just pays for your room and board. You don't have to make an effort to pay for that. If you just get revenue sharing, I don't think they're going to deploy the money for you. I think you get the money.
Yeah.
If you get a scholarship, here's the difference. Here's one of the differences. If you get a scholarship, that's not taxable. If you get revenue sharing money,
Well, some states are working to make that not taxable too.
well, state tax.
Yeah.
You can't change federal government.
That's
IRS
true.
is the IRS.
Yeah.
And so if you get revenue sharing money, that money is federally taxable. And, for example, we did our taxes, and our daughter, you don't even really think about this process until you start going through it. We can't claim our daughter on our taxes. She has to go, if she qualifies, she has to fill out her own tax form. And she worked at a couple of different places, and she doesn't qualify. But the bottom line is that these athletes they'll have to go do a tax form. If it's a scholarship, I don't think so.
I think that's right. Yeah. Interesting.
So that's a difference. That's one thing to think about. But, yeah, anyway, the roster limit thing, I think it could go up to 120. And that's about where it needs to be. And if it stayed at 120, I think all these coaches look around and go, hey, if we lose an extra 10 guys, we'll find them good homes. But they're concerned that they're losing guys that, they really want. Like the 107th guy on your roster is a redshirt freshman who might be a damn good football player in 2 years.
Right.
And there's no way to know when they're 19 years old who's going to develop into a dude and who's not.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? What did we think of Nash Hutmaker a year and a half into his college career? Not sure.
Yeah, he's okay.
But look at what he became. What did we think of Jamari Butler a year and a half into his college football career?
He probably would have made it.
Not playing at LSU.
Not in the 105. No.
So you don't know. And that's why I think the number's got to go up to 120 is because you need to make sure that you're taking care of the guys in your program that you recruited to be there and want to see develop. There's football.